Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. Heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature. Joy to the world, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs implore. While fields and floods, rocks, hills, and plains repeat the sounding joy, repeat the sounding joy, repeat, repeat the sounding. Joy to the world, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ. While fields and floods, rocks, hills, and plains repeat the sounding joy, repeat the sounding joy, repeat, repeat the sounding joy. He rules the earth, he rules the earth with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness, and the wonders of his love, and the wonders of his love, and the wonders of his love. Let every heart prepare him room. Heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing.
Good evening, and welcome to this wonderful evening with Three Roots International. We've waited for a long time preparing this evening for you, and it's just a delight to have all of you joining us for this beautiful evening. Susan and her team have been praying for this evening, have been working very hard, putting together a wonderful program for us, and this is going to be an evening of celebration. It's an evening of thanksgiving. It's an evening of inspiration, quite honestly. I had the distinct privilege and joy and delight, I can't actually find more adjectives, of being in the field in Ethiopia last month with Susan. And what I experienced there in terms of just the celebration of what God has allowed us to do as an organization was just indescribable. And our hope tonight is that we can impart some of that. We can give you some of that hope, that sense of encouragement and excitement to you tonight through this 1 hour that we're going to spend tonight. I have traveled to, about 40-some countries in the last 20 years and worked with poor people all around the world. I myself grew up in India and grew up relatively poor. And over the last 20 years, God has allowed me to sense the hearts and the pain and the anguish, but also the hope and the resilience that comes with going through a life of poverty and pain. And tonight, that is what we want to do. We want to present to you the reality of what we are talking about in Ethiopia and working with men and women and children who are experiencing deep and debilitating poverty. But we also want to bring to you the sense of joy we derive from coming alongside them and seeing those smiles on their faces. So this is going to be a wonderful evening. I hope you're all excited, and welcome once again. I also want to say this. We are in a truly remarkable time in some ways. We live in a period of time where things are so different, especially this year or the last year as well. It's been something that none of us experienced before, and none of us expected in many ways. It's been a year of new normals. It's been a year of disruptions. It's been a year of great anxiety in our own hearts and spirits. It's been a time of uncertainty in so many ways. And so, given that as the context of the time that we're living in, I want to encourage you tonight, especially, to be intentional about being present in this moment. Because oftentimes we are so distracted by all of the stuff that is going on around us. And it's hard sometimes to focus. It's hard sometimes to come into the moment. And so as we begin this evening, that's my encouragement to you. Be intentionally present in this moment. And I'm sure you will have a wonderful time learning about Three Roots International. The vision for the evening, as we said, is to bring to you both the reality and the hope that we have experienced through this work. But we also want to come together. We want to encourage all of us who have come together to put our resources together. Our aim today is to raise $20,000, and through generous donors, we've also received the gift of a matching grant of $20,000. And so for every dollar that we raise tonight, up to $20,000, we have the opportunity of matching that or doubling that, in other words. And so we are hoping that we can all come together this evening and be the resource for what Three Roots International is doing. I also want to, as we begin, draw your attention to this envelope that you all received. For those of you who registered. If you did not register, I don't know what to tell you. But if you registered, you got this envelope, and it has a couple of things that I want to draw your attention to. There's a welcome note from our indomitable leader, Susan Conway. There is a beautiful scripture verse in gold. That's beautiful. And it's a verse from Isaiah 43, verses 1 and 2. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. It's a beautiful thing to keep on your desk. When I was in Ethiopia last month, it was just fascinating to me that a great combination there that at least as far as I could tell, every Ethiopian loves is coffee and popcorn. So there was coffee. It's always served with popcorn. I've never seen that before. And I thought it was just fantastic. So, very appropriately, we have a recipe for Ethiopian popcorn. So try it. Try this with coffee next time, and let us know how that went. It was fantastic. It's just such a coffee drinking culture and country, and I felt home. I felt like home. It was just coffee everywhere, and I couldn't be more happy. And then you have the event program, and at the back is ways to give. You have text to give online, give by mail, and then you have this thing called the QR code, For the longest time, I didn't know what to do with this darn thing. I mean, what do you do with this? But it's simple, actually. You take your camera out, your phone out, and you put the camera on, and you take a picture of the QR code, and it'll open the website for you. And then there is this other envelope there. Keep it closed. We'll come back to it soon. I also want to remind you that there is a silent auction that started, and it's on right now, and it will end on Monday the 13th at 8 p.m. I'm assuming that's Eastern, 8 p.m. Go to it. It's wonderful things. Susan and I, last month, we went to do some shopping. How can you not do shopping when you're in Ethiopia? And so we went and saw these wonderful things that are handmade with such quality and care. All fair trade things today, leather and coffee bundles and baskets and jewelry and all kinds of things. So take a look at that. Every dollar that we raise from the silent auction also goes to our goal for the day of 20,000. So all of that for you as you begin. And now I want to introduce to you our keynote speaker, our executive director, Susan Conway. I call her indomitable because I don't know what else describes her. She is on the go all the time. And I'm telling you, when I was there with her, watching her in action, it was a beautiful thing to see. We went one day to the community where they work outside of Addis Ababa, and as we were driving through the dusty roads, she suddenly goes, "Stop, stop, stop!" And so I was like, "What happened?" And she's looking out of the window, and she's, "Oh, I haven't seen her for so long. I want to go and hug her. I want to go and hug her." And so we stopped the car, and she goes out and hugs this woman. I forget her name. And it was the best sight to see. It was such joyful and loving and caring. And that, to me, was the heart of Susan Conway. Susan has been in this line of work for a very long time. She's been going to Ethiopia since 2007, been going multiple times, many years, definitely going every year. And she's worked for some wonderful organizations. She's worked for World Vision, she's worked for World Relief, she's worked for International Justice Mission. In fact, that's where we met. And she is a remarkable leader. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to meet her, I hope you will get to meet her one day. But for those of us that are gathered here, we get to hear from her now. Susan Conway.
Thank you so much, Abby. What a very kind and generous introduction. Good evening, everybody. We have indeed been anticipating this evening, and so we are thrilled to be here. We have a small number of folks in the room who I currently can't see at all, but thank you for being with us in person. Thank you to the team that helped us get this evening up and running, and thank you to all of you online for signing up and joining in for yet another virtual experience. We're so grateful. I was in Ethiopia, as Abby said, a few weeks ago. It was a joyful reunion indeed. And so I wanted to begin this evening by just giving you a glimpse of what it looks like in the communities right now during harvest season. And so I believe that we're going to see a video of the harvest season in the communities, the beautiful golden brown fields. As we are transitioning into our winter season, the Ethiopian communities are harvesting and preparing for the season ahead. It's a lovely, lovely time to be there. I wanted to give you an example of the contrast of the landscape. So you have the landscape from one of our favorite views in the harvest season, and then the landscape in the rainy season. And it's the same view, but it is a completely different lens through which you're looking. And it's remarkable to see the communities go through these seasonal changes and live so closely to the land. Well, I am always amazed when I'm in Ethiopia and when I've traveled the world at the capacity of human beings to rebuild and to protect and to survive. We have such a strong self-protective drive. And recently I've come across a fascinating illustration of this concept. I don't know if any of you are familiar. It's a program, and it's called ISR, which actually stands for Infant Swimming Resource Program. Through this program, infants as young as 3 months old will learn how to swim in the water, how to survive by floating on their back and by staying afloat until rescue arrives. And when you watch videos of these young babies in the water, with their heads above water, it's just fascinating because so many of us grew up wearing these dreaded floaties without any other option in case something happened to a young child. And this program is kind of coming onto the scene, and parents are taking advantage of it. And what I find so interesting is that this program does not refer to infant survival. What it refers to is infant self-rescue. So the concept is that babies can rescue themselves in a time of trouble. And then as the child gets older, they learn how to swim, and they learn how to kick their feet and reach the edge or reach the shoreline, which is how we all sort of learn how to swim. But I've been thinking about the fact that we as human beings are wired for self-rescue, aren't we? We're wired for self-protection. I actually Googled the words flotation device, and I came up with 9,700,000 results for flotation devices. We run drills, we practice safety procedures. I was just last week changing my smoke alarm batteries, of course because of the beeping, but also because I rely on those alarms. What they do is they call for help on my behalf, but they also tell me that there's an emergency. They help me protect myself, rescue myself from the danger. Turns out this is a universal drive in us, everywhere around the world. We have an innate desire to protect ourselves, but beyond that, we also have an innate desire to flourish. We all want to live flourishing lives. So therefore, it stands to reason that extreme poverty, which prevents flourishing and often subjects people to violence, exploitation, exclusion, that this issue is actually a human issue. This is an issue for all of us to engage. It is a human issue. Right now, the global estimates indicate that there are 689 million humans struggling to survive in extreme poverty. And I think of extreme poverty and the work that I've done around the world as a cycle, as being trapped. And I picture, actually, the same image of being in water that is deep, too deep to stand in, and treading water for survival. You're fearing the worst. You're praying you can hang on. That is life in extreme poverty. Gary Haugen, who's the founder and president of International Justice Mission, once said something to me that I've always remembered. He said, "Poverty sets the trap, and injustice slams the door." Echoing this, Ababu, who is a woman in our programs, when I was sitting across from her in her home, she said to me, "I long to be released from this poverty. It is a trap, and it does not get easier to live that way." So this is the work that Three Roots is doing. We are ending extreme poverty by pulling people from the suffocating waters and keeping generations more from falling in. The scale of global poverty, of course, is overwhelming. We struggle to wrap our minds around it, and if we're being totally honest, we might even wonder if it will ever change. But this evening, I'd like for us to see poverty through a new set of lenses, one that both sees the reality and also sees the possibility that lives can change. Having the right lenses is so helpful. I don't know how many of you wear glasses or contacts, but what lenses do is they give us depth of field. They give us clarity, right? They give us perspective. Never has this been more evident to me than when we have been doing direct medical care clinics in Ethiopia. And there is just nothing like seeing someone get their first pair of glasses and see for the first time. It's remarkable. So through this lens, I'd like for us to do three things. I'd like for us to acknowledge the reality and the brutality of extreme poverty. I'd like for us to honor the innate desire in each of us to self-rescue and to flourish outside of poverty. And I'd like to collectively ring the alarm together and send the help that was needed to pull people from the water and onto dry ground. One of the most accessible ways to understand the reality of daily poverty comes from a researcher named Hans Rosling. He dedicated his life to global health and poverty data, and it's been said about him that he could make data sing, which I think is amazing. You can access him on TED Talks. see him talk about this work. But he wrote a book called Factfulness. And one of the things that he lays out in this book is a series of images that help us to understand what life looks like in extreme poverty. And what Hans Rosling did was he helped us to understand the world in a different way. So instead of thinking there is us and there is them, there is the developed and the developing, he counters that perspective by offering this whole new set of global data. And he says, actually, people all around the world live on one of 4 income levels. There's 4 levels around the world. Now, people in extreme poverty live on level 1. You probably have guessed that we live on level 4. Okay, if you're watching this evening, if you're here in the room, you live on level 4. But life on level 1 looks a very particular way. So let's consider some of these images. On level 1, people walk with shoes or without shoes, or with inexpensive shoes or sandals. On level 1, people do not have clean drinking water. Many will drink from rivers or groundwater sources. People live in semi-permanent mud homes. People cook over an open flame. This is the reality on life at level 1, which is life on less than $1.90 a day. This is the reality for the households that Three Roots serves. The woman, whose name is Zebenesh, that I hugged 4 weeks ago, lives on level 1 in a mud home. It's hard to embrace a hard reality like this for so many people around the world. And we ask ourselves, can this actually change? And the great news is there are mountains of research that tell us that yes, change is possible. It is statistically proven that households can change their level of income and their level of well-being, so they can move up the ladder. So let's look at life on level 2. Now, life on level 2 is on $2 to $8 a day. So when you live on level 2, you use a bicycle, you have access to wells, you live in a concrete or a cement home, and you cook on an electric cooktop, okay? So you can see the vast improvement to quality of life. And the question is, how then do people make this move, right? How do we get to upward mobility? That's a great question. I love the way that Desmond Tutu talks about coming to the answer. He says, at some point, we have to stop pulling people from the river. We have to actually go upstream and figure out why they're falling in. This quote to me is a perfect illustration of the need to get to the root of the cause of poverty, not just place a Band-Aid on the needs that people are experiencing day to day. And so to answer this, we have to understand what keeps people on level 1. Why is it so hard to break generational cycles of poverty? It's complex and it's nuanced. But we at Three Roots believe that the answer lies in 3 critical dimensions of life. That is your level of education, the quality of your health, and the reliability of your household income. When a person lacks education, health, and income, they just cannot flourish. The problem, this seems logical. It makes good sense to us, right? But it's worth noting that this is not actually just a theory. In fact, the United Nations measures the quality of human life according to these 3 dimensions. They then rank countries according to the well-being of humans in that country. And they publish this annually, and it's called the Human Development Index. The interesting thing is that our capacities in any of these dimensions strengthen the others. So, for example, the healthy child can go to school. That child then becomes an educated adult who can get a professional job. That adult then becomes the parent who has enough income to send their child to school and pay for their health care. And so these 3 dimensions of life work together, and that's why we designed our model like this, to support the education, health, and income of households across communities. Poverty is actually multidimensional, and so solutions should likewise be multidimensional. People are falling into the waters of extreme poverty because they don't have access and resources that they need to preserve their health, their education, and their economic livelihood. And because poverty roars across families and generations, it's nearly impossible to reverse this cycle unless you have someone who can throw you a life preserver. So we must get people out of the water. And we do this through direct services, through programs, through training, through improving knowledge and skills. and then people must be able to live securely on dry ground. In other words, they need to be able to sustain the gains that they're making. Empowerment and sustainability are the cornerstones of our work. This is probably the hardest aspect of community development to handle, to tackle. It's easily overlooked, it's often mismanaged, or it's just skipped entirely. And it breaks my heart to say that there is a graveyard of nonprofits who have just kind of given up and walked away because it has been too difficult, because they have succumbed to skepticism. But what is true is that all of us who want to make changes in our life need the time to do that. It requires strategic work, leading with community participation, and being in it for the long haul. So quite simply, it means that at Three Roots, we just do not give up. We walk with communities for the long haul. We have to change our minds to change our behaviors. And so knowing that, we really focus on this issue of sustainability. Now, what does this mean when I say mindset change in a community? Let's just walk through 3 scenarios. A mother decides to give birth at the clinic instead of at home where she's lost her previous babies in home births. Her baby survives. Other women see this in the community. They birth their babies at the clinic, and the infant and child mortality rates go down across the community. Parents across the community feel it's best to send their children to school so their children graduate and they complete high school, and the prevalence of child marriage goes down across the community. Women attend their savings groups. They save 25 cents a week faithfully. They take small business loans. They lend to one another out of their savings. They build income streams for their families. They increase their savings and improve their livelihoods. Household income goes up. So over time, these beliefs and these behaviors cascade across the community, and what you get is widespread change. 2 years ago, I met a boy named Haptamu, and I want to tell you his story briefly. I had the chance to see how Haptamu was forging a new path for his generation. He was in grade 8 at the Babogaya Primary School, which is the school that Three Roots runs and is funding consistently. We provide education to almost 400 kids at that school every year, kindergarten through 8th grade. Otherwise, those kids would walk several hours to the next serviceable school. On this particular day, I was at the school when they were doing their highly coveted rewards ceremony. Kids around the world love reward ceremonies. Haptamu was the last student to receive his award. He was called to the school steps in front of the entire student crowd, and he was asked to show us what he had created. Now, I was perplexed by this, and I watched Haptamu delicately place masterfully crafted replica on a table. There was a helicopter. There was an Ethiopian Airlines plane. There was a fully motorized bulldozer, a dump truck with a working lift bed, and other things. The helicopter had working propellers and headlights, and I was astounded. In a community without any electricity, without any teaching or skills on engineering or wiring or building, Haptamu had created an entire line of electric motorized toys, including a working radio rewired from a broken cell phone to include a flashlight. I was truly amazed. Not only that, but he had created each piece with such incredible pride that could only come from a true love of the work. The creation reveals the passion of the creator. As Haptamu presented each item for the students to see, there was thunderous applause, and young faces stood amazed at what they could do if they too applied themselves like Haptamu had. Little faces craned their heads and necks to get a better view. Haptamu was uncomfortable with the attention, but he calmly endured. And I was thrilled to have seen that, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. The director of the school came to the front of the steps again, and she asked for Haptamu's father to come forward as well. From the crowd emerged an older gentleman. He was wearing a t-shirt. His pants were rolled up to his calves. His muddy legs and feet revealed his profession. He was a farmer, and he had stopped his work to attend this recognition ceremony during the farming season, which is incredibly rare. Standing on the steps, the school director invited Haptamu's siblings to join them, and she went on to explain that their family had suffered an unspeakable tragedy that year when their mother had passed away. Haptamu and his two siblings were left to be raised by their father. Having little to no education by himself, Haptamu's father worked in the fields all day long to sell his crops and send his children to school. He then went home, slept on a thin mat on a mud floor, and did it all over again the next day, every day. Despite their poverty and the thick fog of grief, the director stated that the students were all top achievers in the school, and they were there every day. How exactly does that happen? Perhaps through the work ethic of a dedicated father or the opportunity provided by a revitalized school. But as it turns out, Haptamu's father was constantly and meticulously collecting scrap materials and little pieces of wire. And he would diligently bring them home for his boy so that Haptamu could build, test, and finalize his masterpiece creations by the light of a kerosene flame. Because of this, the school chose to recognize Haptamu's father as well with a certificate of honor. There was not a dry eye among our teachers or staff. Afterwards, I spoke with Haptamu, and I asked him if I could see a few of his creations up closer. And though he was quiet and shy, he graciously agreed. I said to him, "Why do you make these? Do you want to sell them?" And he said, "No, I make them for my own enjoyment and so that other people can learn." I asked him to show me his favorite piece, and he presented a replica of a public bus. It had padded seats, it had a fully retractable door, it had working headlights. But what he loved the most about it was what was written on the front windshield. He turned it around to show me that it said, "I can change the world." Haptamu was born this way. This giftedness to build and create things out of nothing. He was given this gift by the Creator God for his joy and the goodness of others. But the fact that Haptamu engaged this dream of helping others through these creations is the most courageous act. And I wonder how many Haptamus are treading water in the river. How many are trying to keep their heads above the current? What would his future have been without his education? Well, I can tell you, because I see it all the time. It would be the same as that of his father. He would be a daily laborer with little to no income and difficulty providing for his children's needs. You know, as the pandemic has dragged on, the plight of those in extreme poverty has gotten significantly worse. The World Bank estimates that 97 million people will slide into poverty because of the COVID pandemic. And this is a statistic that we call COVID-induced poverty. Imagine 97 million people falling into the river. We have to be honest and call this what it is. This is a crisis. This is a time to engage the hard reality and take action. It is unprecedented, which we've said for months. And so it requires unprecedented responses. And for Three Roots, we are responding by being resolute and moving our program activities forward. We have 200 women in weekly savings meetings where they are trained on financial literacy and start small businesses. We've done several nutritional distributions to our 150 families in our critical care program. We're increasing the quality at the Babagaya Primary School. We're starting 2 kindergartens in new communities. And for the first time ever, we've achieved a 100% graduation rate at the school in the community. Every single 8th grade student has passed and advanced to high school. We're training caregivers, we're training pastors, we're empowering community leaders. And this is only possible because so many of you tonight are fueling our work with your financial resources and prayer. I was listening to an interview with Samantha Power recently. She's the administrator for USAID. And she mentioned that she's created a term called upstander. And she went on to explain that we live our lives along a spectrum of bystanding and upstanding. And on our good days, we stand up. We engage the hard things. We show up to help. And on our hard days, we stand by. And we float between these two perspectives. She said, a lot of times we stand by because we're simply just too overwhelmed. And while I can relate to that, I want to suggest a third way of living. And I'd like to suggest that we don't just simply have to stand by or stand up, but that we can stand with, to withstand. I think we're all capable of living as withstanders on both good and bad days. Withstanders link arms, they take action, they engage, they hold out hope. We do not succumb to fear or skepticism. We borrow courage from those who have gone before us. For those of us who are people of faith this evening, we draw our strength from God, who describes his very self as God with us, Jehovah Jireh, with all of us, with those who live in extreme poverty, who are treading water, with those who want to take action but don't know where to start, with those of us who doubt but want to believe. He is God with us. That's why we chose Isaiah 43 for this evening. When you walk through the waters, I will be with you. They will not overwhelm you. Though we are overwhelmed sometimes by the issue of extreme poverty, we have a way out. He is the God who is with us, and he is the God who sends us, and he is also the God who commands us to take action, to care for the poor, to rescue the oppressed. And as we act, we demonstrate his presence to those who are desperately waiting for a way out. You know, time and time again, as I've sat across from families around the world who live in extreme poverty, I have noticed that there are two questions that are commonly asked when you live daily in suffering and pain. And the first one is God real? And the second one is he good? It's so hard to believe those things are true when you're suffering. But as we respond, we proclaim and we demonstrate the witness of God to those who are suffering. As we link arms, we make it possible for people to chart a new course into flourishing. There are a few people better to demonstrate this than our staff in Ethiopia. We have an amazing team, and our staff are withstanders. They walk with, they suffer with, they rejoice with, they cry with, they comfort with, and they demand justice with. They've taught me the joy of collective suffering and collective joy. In closing, I wanted to share a quote from David Brooks, an author and speaker, as I think about what our staff have taught me. And he talks about something that he calls eulogy virtues. He wrote an article for the New York Times recently, and he's reflecting on the people who have impacted him deeply. And he said, "When I meet such a person, it brightens my whole day. But I confess I often have a sadder thought. It occurs to me that I have not achieved that level of generosity. I've achieved a decent level of career success, but I've not achieved generosity of spirit or that depth of character." It occurred to me that there are two sets of virtues he talks about. Resume virtues, which you accrue throughout your career in the marketplace, and eulogy virtues, which of course are what is talked about you at the end of your life. Were you kind? Were you brave? Honest, faithful? Were you capable of deep love? He goes on to say this: "I came to the conclusion that the people I admired had achieved an unfakeable inner virtue, built slowly from specific moral and spiritual accomplishments." These words, slow, specific, spiritual, this sounds like enduring partnership. It sounds like linking arms with those in need and walking with them towards wholeness. So that's the invitation I want to extend to you this evening. And I pray that by joining us in this work, you will experience the moral and spiritual accomplishment of seeing the darkness of extreme poverty rolled back as the light of dignity and healing comes flooding in. Author Andy Crouch says, "The flourishing of the vulnerable requires the vulnerability of the flourishing." May we be brave enough to engage lives that journey closely with those who are poor and suffering, and to reject complacency and apathy so that we can see transformation. As we say at Three Roots, we talk about moving onward together. Onward towards hope, onward towards transformation, onward towards healing, onward towards reaching thousands more families. Until all are on dry ground, we move onward together.
Welcome back. We have a wonderful guest for you tonight. Ruth Michael is here with us. Ruth has got an incredible journey and a story, and she's a very kind supporter of Three Roots International and a friend of Susan's. And we thought it would be a treat for all of us to have her come and speak to us. Ruth's got a background in business management and project management. He spent the last 15 years in the nonprofit sector. She did health programming for Operation Smile. And then for the last 6 years, she's been working with Special Olympics. And tonight, it's just a great delight to have you here with us, Ruth.
This is my honor, and thanks for having me. It's really incredible to be part of this amazing team. And thanks for having me, yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you were telling me just before we began the program that you didn't quite expect to be in the nonprofit work. And here you are, having worked for Operation Smile, and now you're working for Special Olympics. How did you find yourself in the nonprofit world?
Right. Just like you said, you mentioned, I learned business. I came out as a business manager from college, and you know, just like many would relate, my passion and my choice to invest my time and energy on the work that I'm doing now did not form until much later into my career as a teacher for a few years. And then I started working for Operation Smile, which afforded me the opportunity to be part of medical missions for cleft lip and palate surgeries for patients all around the country, which also meant that I was able to travel to the most rural areas, meet families, hear their stories, and just understand how people would see their children or their child with cleft lip and think, oh, it's a curse, and I have to shelter this child, just because there's no access, right? And not knowing that it's not a curse, and with just a few hours of medical care, their loved ones' lives will change forever. And what those years have taught me is really what we need as people, all of us, in one way or another, is access to each other, access to each other's stories that open our hearts and our hands and make us creative, resources that we can bring to the table. And I think that's the solution. I think I have seen the same thing in my work today too, here, working for Special Olympics. It's the same thing. You see in most marginalized communities, whether it's in the disability area or in poverty, it's access to education. It's access to quality health care. People cannot thrive without these things in place, and I think Susan said it very well earlier. So it's my privilege to be part of these two organizations I have been a part of, and now are really working hard to break these barriers.
What an incredible journey to be on, right? I mean, it's amazing to be on this journey of being able to access stories of people that are suffering for 15 years. Wonderful. So in that 15 years, when did you get to know Three Roots International? When did you connect with Three Roots?
Yeah, so I cannot tell you a specific year, but Susan and I met in Ethiopia while I was still with Operation Smile. It just so happens I was doing or hosting a medical mission, and Susan was there in Addis with a group, and she was able to come volunteer. We always need more hands,
sure.
you know, to help us, and they spent an afternoon or a morning, I don't remember, with us, and that was our initial introduction. And because we have a good friends network, we've stayed in touch through the years. When I moved here about 9 years ago, Suzanne and I continued to be in touch, and she would share over coffee her heart, her vision for the work that she's doing in Ethiopia. So
That's wonderful.
that has been my introduction to it, and I think like many of us have experienced and are moving away from charity models that take away the pleasure and dignity of earning people's livelihoods. I think I've seen Three Roots and Susan and the team continue to be dedicated to the mission they set out to do.
That's great. That's great. So you worked with Operation Smile. You worked with Special Olympics. You have you were born in Ethiopia.
Absolutely,
And raised in
yes.
Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So you've gone on this incredible journey, and now you know Three Roots International for the last many years. Is there anything about the approach of Three Roots International that stands out to you, that impresses you, or that you appreciate?
Absolutely, yes. I think the fact that we are investing in one community, investing in people's livelihood in all of it, not just handing things or not empowering things, and not empowering people is really the biggest mistake we can make. When we empower people, they can be creative, they can aspire, they can do more, they can multiply that. And I think Three Roots does that, and the model really dignifies people.
Yeah, that's great. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this and ask you a question about this. We all know what's going on in Ethiopia in terms of the political situation and all of that. In fact, the day I reached Ethiopia was when the national emergency was declared. And so what I would love to hear from you is what would you say about that? What are your thoughts on that, to the extent that you're open to sharing? And how can people stay best informed on what is happening in Ethiopia today?
Yeah, great questions, and what time you chose to be there. I would say what I tell myself, really, and what my friends and I, family and I say to ourselves is, do not make the headlines your source of information. Just like each one of us want to be really known, be a part of conversations, in-depth conversations that help you know and understand the current situation. I have the privilege of obviously talking to my family and friends on the ground, but if you don't, contact people that are connected to those kind of people, so you are able to have a full picture and are able to hear those stories that touch you, that give you hope. And I think this is a very discouraging time, obviously, but it's also a time that we should come together to rebuild, to reimagine, to inspire, aspire to do more.
Yeah. That's very sage advice. Two quick questions for you, Ruth. One is, through this journey of having lived in Ethiopia, born and brought up in Ethiopia, and for the last 15 years working with these organizations that are doing such wonderful work, what are one or two lessons that you have learned that you would be willing to share with us?
Yeah, I think going back to the same idea we talked about earlier, about investing ourselves to learn those stories, to reach out, not with just our finances or otherwise, but to invest ourselves. That's when we can bring creative solution and actually truly give to one another. Gifts of change, gifts of creative, helpfulness.
That's great. That's great. That's a great lesson. Final question, Ruth. It's been a delight talking to you. I wish we had more time. There is a number of people, there is such a large number of people who are so keen on going to Ethiopia or a country like that and being of help, being able to serve. And at the same time, there are a number of people who are working in those kinds of contexts already, right? And so in a context like that, it's very, very easy to be burdened by all that you witness and experience, right? So the question is, what would you say to those people who are already engaged in that about how they can be hopeful, remain hopeful? And for those that are eager to go into that kind of work, what would you have as an encouragement for them?
A very big question to answer, but I think of life, I think life in general can be very discouraging in so many ways, and we have to seek out things that inspire us, like the story Susan shared earlier. And if we are on the lookout for those, there are very many stories of encouragement and hope for those that are on the ground that are, having a hard time maybe functioning in the way that they would like to. I'd say talk to other people, other organizations, and I'll stop there. But yeah, let's work together.
That's wonderful. What a treat to have you. Thank you so much for coming, and I can sense the gentle and the strong spirit that is very evident in you. Thank you so much for coming and blessing us.
It's been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We are here tonight not just because Three Roots International invited us. We're here not just because we really like Susan, although that is true. We're not here just because of the deep admiration we have for the work of Three Roots International. We are here really because of that intentional choice we have made to be here. And it is that idea of choice that I want to leave with you or present to you tonight for just a moment. You see, choice is a very key part of any creative process. In creating anything, there is choice involved. If you're an artist, you don't just go to the easel with a complete picture in mind. You have some sort of a sense of what it is that you're going to create. But as those brush strokes start to fill the canvas, a picture begins to emerge. It is the same if you're a photographer. You don't pick up your camera with a complete picture already set in your mind. But as you begin to look into that viewfinder, you allow the picture to form. And I think it is the same with us as well. We are always all making choices. And those choices are what make us who we ultimately become or are becoming. There is a verse in the Bible that has fascinated me for a long time. It happens in the story of Moses, when Moses' sort of time was coming to an end, and the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, were about to transition to a brand new leadership under Joshua. They were at the cusp of that new transition. They were at the end of what was a 50-year-old journey, a 40-year-old journey through the wilderness. They're at the site of the promised land. They're about to embark on this new journey, on this new phase of their life. And at that point, they're presented with a choice. There is no need for a choice, but even in that moment, it is incredibly critical that they choose, and they choose right. They choose prosperity. They choose life. They choose blessing. The choice was absolutely critical in that moment. Allow me to read just a few verses. This is from chapter 30 of Deuteronomy, verses 11, and I won't read the whole passage, but I'll pick and choose. Now, what I am commanding you today is not too difficult for you or beyond reach. It is not up in heaven so that you have to ask, who will ascend into heaven to get it and proclaim it to us so we may obey it? No, the word is near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart so you may obey it. See, I set before you today life and prosperity, death and destruction. For I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, and to keep his commands, decrees, and laws. Then you will live and increase, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land you're entering to possess. This day, and this is the verse that has fascinated me, this day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now, choose life. To choose life, you have to be intentional. You have to be continual in that process of choosing life. You can't just stand passively by. Susan reminded us of the bystander and the upstander and the withstander who stands with, and that's a choice. Ultimately, the choice is free. We are free to choose. But the burden to make that choice is not an option. We are called to make the choice. And the invitation tonight is to make that choice. Indifference is a choice as well, by the way. But we know what kind of choice it is. It is not a choice towards life and blessing, but it's a choice towards death and curse. The call for us today is to make that choice. Elie Wiesel is a Nobel laureate, a Holocaust survivor. In a 1999 address to President Clinton, talking about the perils of indifference, he said this: indifference is not a beginning, it is an end. And therefore, indifference is always the friend of the enemy, for it benefits the aggressor, never his victim, whose pain is magnified when he or she feels forgotten. We are inviting you tonight, friends, to make a choice. Make a choice to stand with our team, to stand with Three Roots International, so that together we can be a source of blessing and life to the community that we are serving. Why Ethiopia in particular, you might ask? No particular reason, except for the fact that God, in his divinely appointed plan, has led us to that community and led us to the creation of this ministry, of this organization. Why you and not others, you might ask? No particular reason, except that God, again, in his divinely appointed plan, has brought us to this hour and to this invitation. So the choice tonight is to come together with Three Roots. I mentioned at the start of the program that we have a goal of raising $20,000. As of about, 6-7 minutes ago, I was told that we have already raised about $15,400. Isn't that amazing? There is a sense among our participants today, among our invitees today, among our friends today, to come together and be a blessing. And there is a little more to be done, a little more to be accomplished tonight. We are truly in a remarkable time today, as I mentioned at the start of this evening. There is all kinds of disruptions, new normals, rising poverty, increasing inequalities, and all of that kind of thing. We have large and significant needs, which are only exacerbated now, today, because of the time we live in today. And therefore, because of that, let me encourage you tonight to open your wallets more, open your hearts more, and to give more than you might have otherwise done in what we might have called normal times. We are not in normal times. It is anything but normal. When I was in Ethiopia last month, I saw the amount of hardship that our teams face there. The amount of, many of them walked for hours through the communities because during rainy seasons and difficult weather, they cannot take normal cars and normal vehicles and all of that. So there is a need to buying an all-terrain vehicle so that we can access the community. One of the best places that I was in my trip in Ethiopia was not the hotel, not the restaurant in the hotel, not the many restaurants that I went to have Ethiopian food, but it was that school that Susan mentioned about. It was that school that was in a sort of a valley surrounded by teff fields all around and those surrounded by mountains. And as I stood there in that beautiful spot, I thought, what an amazing privilege to come and be a blessing to this rising generation that will transform that community for years to come. And so that's an investment. But as I stood there, I also noticed that there was no periphery, there was no wall to protect that property, to protect that school. Susan and our team are planning to buy solar-powered laptops. Can you think about that? Amazing opportunity to bless and encourage and grow those children, right? They're planning to buy library books. I went and saw it was closed when I went there, but through the glass pane I saw the few books they had really nicely arranged on shelves. But they're trying to invest into that so that we can together build that community up. So all kinds of needs. They want, the desire is for 200 women, by the way, to partake in our training programs next year and to be able to join the peer-to-peer lending programs and things like that. All of these incur costs. We have tremendous plans. We have beautiful plans, and we want all of you to come together with us. And so that is the invite for us today. 15,000 plus already raised. We have just a little more to go. My sense is that we will very easily cross the 20,000 target that we have. I want to encourage all of you to come together. In the packet that we had, I don't know, yeah, there you are. In the packet that we had, I mentioned you the card that had all the ways to give. Text to give online, give by mail, and that beautiful picture there that you click, that you take with your camera, that will lead you to the website to give and things like that. Give that. I also want to encourage you, by the way, to also consider joining as a monthly partner, joining us as a Thrive partner. Anywhere upward of $20, I'm told, 20, 50, 100, whatever it is that you are led to. Join us to be a Thrive partner, to support the ministry and the mission of Three Roots International. I want to give you a moment now to think through what it is that you feel led to do. We have a little more to go as far as our goal for the weekend is concerned. Remember also the silent auction. But beyond that, there might be other things that you might feel led to join as a Thrive partner and things like that. So Chris and Ryan are going to play some music for us. You guys have been fantastic, by the way. But as they play, I want to encourage you to take just a moment to think through what you would do to come together with Three Roots International. thank you for being with us tonight. We've gone a little over time. Our sincere apologies for that. And so let me close with just a benediction. But before that, I have one small favor to ask you. In the packet that you got, there is an addressed envelope with a blank card there. I'd like for you to take that card. It's got a blank backside, and I want you to write down a message of encouragement for the Three Roots team. It will be something that they would treasure, I know for sure, just judging by what I saw and witnessed spending my time with them last month. Do that, send it. It's a postage paid, addressed envelope. All you need to do is write and put it in the mailbox. It'll bless us tremendously. Let me send us off with this benediction. As we depart from here tonight, fill our hearts with love for the unloved, and courage to take up the cause of the oppressed, and grieving spirits for all that pains your heart. Help us never to fear, for you have redeemed us. When we pass through the waters, you are with us. When we walk through fire, we will not be set ablaze. Help us that we might let justice roll down like waters, for those we can see and those that are far away, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Amen. Thank you, folks.
Oh, come, holy faithful, joyful and triumphant. Oh, come ye to Bethlehem. Come and behold him, born the King of angels. Oh, come, let happy morning, Jesus. To thee be all glory given. Word of the Father, now in flesh appearing. Oh, come, let us adore Him. Oh, come, let us adore Him. Oh, come, let us adore Him. Christ the Lord, the Lord. His name shall be Wonderful Counselor. His name shall be Everlasting Father. His name shall be Prince of Peace, Mighty God. His name shall be Emmanuel. We'll praise your name forever. We'll praise your name forever. We'll praise your name forever. Christ the Lord. We'll praise your name forever. We'll praise your name forever. We'll praise your name forever. Christ the Lord. The Lord. His name shall be Wonderful Counselor.